I don't want to be strong like man who look pretty. I want to be strong like bitch that fight bears in the forest.
Welcome to another episode of Bitch vs. Bear with your host, Amber.
Me.
And me, Sydney, co-owners of Shield Maiden Training Co. This is a show where we bitch, laugh, and chat about all things fitness and wellness related to women in the LGBTQIA plus community. I love that you're like 3, 2. It was like, I was like on the edge of my seat for the countdown. I was like, when's it gonna start?
Gotta keep you on your toes.
I was like, waiting. Oh, geez. Okay. Amber, what the hell are we talking about today?
Oh, goodness. Today, we are diving into the intriguing connection between rising temperatures and just rising tempers.
It feels really, especially with the heat waves that are just like all over. And that
totally
is crazy.
Yeah, we're going to explore why violence seems to spike during hot weather and who is most affected by this phenomenon. We're trying to unravel the mystery behind why aggression and violence seem to increase when the mercury rises.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and a somewhat alarming topic with significant implications for public safety and social behavior.
It really is. And actually, the reason I was joking that it's timely is because at the time of recording this episode is we just had an incident where former President Trump was at a rally, and there was what I'm assuming was an assassination attempt. We don't have a lot of details, and so it's one of those things where we don't really know. But I would bet that the heat didn't help. The East Coast, he was in, I think, Pittsburgh, somewhere in Pennsylvania. And so I think, we've had a lot of hot weather here on the East Coast. I'm sure while it's probably not the main factor, it could be an underlying.
I think there's some other things that would lead to an assassination attempt.
Okay, so there is some science
right.
regarding this. So numerous studies have shown a correlation between high temperatures and increased aggression. Mm-hmm. One of the leading theories is the general aggression model, which, there's a whole model around it, which suggests that heat acts as a stressor that increases the physiological arousal and irritation. So really making people more prone to aggression. Really, this is just when we're hot, our body's under stress. I think we actually touched on this subject a little bit when talking about fitness, why pushing ourselves is good, not just for our bodies, but for mental and kind of pushing the threshold a little bit. So your body's under stress when you're working out, because you're getting hotter.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Makes sense.
It's a really simple but powerful connection. Our bodies need to use energy to cool themselves down, and which can come from our prefrontal cortex, so the part of the brain that helps us self-regulate. And when it's hot, the brain might have to reroute some power, which can lead to more impulsive behavior.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like a circuit system. We're hot. We gotta put some more power to the AC, which then means that other systems don't have as much power, and then they fail to function properly.
It's like my car.
Yeah, exactly.
On the highway in the heat.
Yes. Yeah.
If I want to be cool, I have to go slow.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So really what it does is create a perfect storm for conflict and violence, especially if you think about environments where tensions are already high.
Like perhaps the United States right now?
Yeah, and our heat domes, bubbles, whatever they are, aren't helping.
Of course not. Nothing. Of course we couldn't have something just help us.
No.
All right, so this isn't a new phenomenon, obviously. Historical data shows that riots, conflicts, and violent crimes often spike during heat waves. So, for instance, the infamous New York City blackout of 1977 occurred during a sweltering heat wave and resulted in widespread looting and violence. 1988 wasn't just a year of record-breaking sunshine and the second year of our gracing this wonderful world.
Yes.
It was also There was also record-breaking violence. Well, that's unfortunate.
Had very little to do with our 1 year of being alive.
Yeah, probably. It's true. Nobody, there wasn't enough of us to go around.
It's true.
There were unprecedented numbers of murders, rapes, armed robberies, and assaults, around 1.5 million of them. In one study, scientists tracked uprisings around the world from 1791 to 1880 and found that the overwhelming majority occurred in the summer months. Makes sense.
Yep.
It's too cold in the winter. Nobody wants to be outside.
Well, there's that.
Whichever end of the planet they looked at, the relationships still held up. For example, in Europe, they were most likely to happen in July, while in South America, they were more likely to happen in January. Extreme heat fuels violence in ways that we are just beginning to understand. Rising temperatures have an impact on mental health and human behavior. And evidence has shown that warmer temperatures correlate with a 4% increase in interpersonal violence and a 14% rise in intergroup conflicts globally. It's a pattern that's hard to ignore.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. So, like most things, we're gonna loop this around to our favorite people, us.
The gays.
The gays, the women. So, really, we're going to talk about who's most affected. Research indicates that certain groups are more vulnerable than others. So, low-income communities, for instance, often lack access to air conditioning and safe, cool spaces, making them more susceptible to negative effects of heat. As temperatures climb during extreme weather, which we've seen a lot of recently, and that can also mean, extreme weather doesn't just have to be heat, but the things that precede other extreme events, so like tornadoes, hurricanes, those kinds of things. As extreme weather happens, so too does the rate of gender-based violence.
But of course.
Yeah. But neither heat nor violence affects everyone equally.
Of course it doesn't.
No. Women and girls are facing heightened risks from both the direct physical threats of extreme heat and the violence triggered by increasing temperatures and fueled by patriarchal norms. Extreme heat exacerbates the drivers of violence that enable and normalize violence against women and girls. In a 2018 study in Madrid highlighted a 40% increase in the risk of intimate partner femicide following heat waves.
Goodness.
That's a huge percentage.
That's bananas.
Alongside that, there were spikes in police reports and helpline calls. So it wasn't just that one thing. There was very clearly a trend.
Yeah.
Similarly, in a 2021 study in Kenya, found women in regions hit by extreme weather events, including heat waves, were 60% more likely to report intimate partner violence. Yeah. So, not great when the heat goes up. Yeah.
So do dudes' tempers.
Yep.
Great. Lovely. Wonderful. So glad that the climate is...
Warming.
Yes. Wonderful.
Climate change.
I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Has more repercussions than one might think.
Man. All right. So along with women, extreme heat disproportionately impacts LGBTQIA plus communities. Of course. LGBTQIA plus communities are more likely to experience homelessness, air pollution, and health problems compared to their cisgender heterosexual counterparts because of extreme heat.
You're doing great.
Doing great. I'm trying so hard. It's the heat.
It's the heat.
It's so hot.
It is so hot.
So queer and trans folks also tend to move to segregated locations to reduce the risk of discrimination and harassment from neighbors and landlords. These areas are often the most polluted, which causes many health issues long term and also makes them much more vulnerable to natural disasters.
Yeah, right. So like you're probably moving to places that are less desirable for other communities and therefore they're much more likely to like have buildings that don't have AC in them or haven't been well maintained. So if there's a forest fire, hurricane, flooding, those kinds of things, they're going to be more susceptible to danger and just all kinds of things. And it's
Makes
just one of
sense.
those things where like it's all predicated, right? Like
yes.
it's just you're always like, oh, okay, well, I'm moving away from this discrimination, but now I have this whole other set of issues
Right.
that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And like one seems much more immediate threat where the other one is like, oh, well, what's the likelihood that there's going to be an extreme weather event?
Pretty high now.
Pretty high now, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. On the one hand, you have straight cisgender white men. And on the other hand, you have tornadoes.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, you should go see the new movie Twisters.
I saw that there was a remake coming out. Is it a remake or like a whole new?
I think it's like a whole new...
I haven't researched it.
Yeah, I think it's like a... It's not a remake of the original. It's like a continuation.
Ooh. I'll have to look into it.
Which was really interesting because when I heard the director talking about it and talking about the sustainability practices they used during filming,
Ooh.
because they were like, how can we make a film about extreme weather that is, climate change relevant and not do sustainable practices? So like all of the trailers had solar panels on them.
Cool.
They donated any of the extra like food from set to food banks and things like that. So like,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, it was really interesting.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And also, yeah, like you should
Obviously. These like billion-dollar
Yeah.
industries should absolutely be doing sustainable practices. Anyways.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'll have to share. I was a little nervous because I love Twister. It is one of my all-time favorite
It's a great
movies.
movie. It's a great movie.
We got cows.
You got
That
cows.
is my favorite. I cannot tell you how often my brother and I used to quote that movie to each other when we were kids.
I feel like I need to go back and rewatch it. It's been a little while since I've seen it.
It's so good.
I know what I'm
It's
doing
so
for the
good.
rest of the day.
The effects.
Oh, no.
Because like I went back and watched it moderately recently and was like, oh my god,
There's
this
no
is
way they hold up.
hilarious.
No way.
It was still so good. Still so good. Anyways, okay. Bringing it back. Circling back to climate change.
Twisters.
Twisters. All right. Climate change is intersectional in all the wrong ways. Of course it is. Exacerbating racism, classism, and misogyny. People who are low income, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, or LGBTQ+, all face marginalization, disenfranchisement, and discrimination. These communities are already underserved, which makes them the least prepared to recover from the most severe harms caused by the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Really should have really dug into these paragraphs before I signed them. I did a quick skim
Yep.
and didn't realize
Learning on the fly.
I gave myself all the really big words.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the next
No,
one?
it's fine. I can do it.
Okay.
I'm smart.
You are.
I just read a lot as a kid, so I said them all in my head. I didn't have to say them out loud. All right. The climate crisis will exacerbate structural inequalities, creating divergent challenges for LGBTQ plus people. The Center for American Progress, CAP, states that, quote, environmental injustice disproportionately affects women, low-income communities, and LGBTQ plus people. What's more, people who share more than one of these identities may be even more disproportionately burdened, end quote. Obviously.
Yeah. So like it's compounding. It's not like, oh, I'm in one of these communities, so like I'm good, like it's okay. No. It compounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's rough.
Okay.
Okay.
To be fair, there are things we can do to mitigate some of these issues.
Great.
Yeah. I didn't want to just leave us like, hey, guess what? The temperature rises and everything literally feels like it's in hell.
We are literally in hell.
We're literally burning. So one of the key strategies is improving access to cooling centers and public spaces where people can escape the heat.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I know a lot of cities and urban plannings have started to include green spaces, that shade areas.
Nice.
And they can also, these shade trees in urban areas can also help reduce the heat island effect in cities. If you're not familiar with the heat island, it is that there's so much concrete and asphalt and brick and building materials that absorb heat and then radiate it back. So like oftentimes what you find is in urban areas, the temperature is 10, 20 degrees hotter than the suburban areas that have much more green space. And so actually Boston did a really cool study and then subsequently went around and like picked a neighborhood in Boston and planted trees and has been studying this for like a long term, like 20 years now.
Oh, wow.
So it's well known that this happens, and it's becoming part of landscape design and things like that to incorporate much more cooling trees, shrubbery, greenery into urban spaces.
Nice.
Which we all like. Because like,
and like if you have a nice shady sidewalk, you're much more likely to walk somewhere
exactly
than drive your car.
Yeah, which, again, compounding, right? Also, public awareness campaigns can educate people about the risk of heat-related aggression and encourage proactive measures such as staying hydrated and finding cool places during heat waves. So obviously, this whole month we've talked a lot about heat in different ways. And so this is kind of a good culmination of like why it's important to stay hydrated.
Hydrate.
So your body doesn't think you're, dying, and then it doesn't also get angry.
Yes.
And then the third kind of like key strategy is community programs. So they offer support and resources to vulnerable populations. And it really is crucial in preventing violence. So making sure that people have access to talk about things, get help when needed, can help reduce all of those things.
Perfect.
Yeah. Really, the connection between heat and hostility is very complex.
Yes.
But it's also very simple. Heat goes up.
Tempers go up.
Tempers go up.
Yeah. Makes
sense.
So
with that simplicity kind of underlying, it's crucial for creating safer communities. And we do that by recognizing that that is a trend. It's just what happens, and that's okay. We just have to combat it. We have to mitigate it.
Yes.
Yeah. So really, I guess, address the root cause and implement effective strategies, we can help reduce the impact of heat and aggression. Like, not just on, but like, I mean, the goal is if temperatures rise when heat goes up, stop having the heat go up.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
And how do we do that? Well,
that's a whole thing.
That's a whole nother podcast. We should find a good environmental podcast and link it, because I don't know. I mean, there's strategies for sure, but it's something we're all facing.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue until we all get together and decide that we've had enough.
And I think it's not just, it's not people like us, because like our carpooling isn't going to stop global warming.
No.
It's the major companies and industries and manufacturers and whatevers that need to commit to this and implement more sustainable practices. And who knows, it might be too late. I don't know. I'm not an environmentalist, but it's very scary.
It is very scary. And it's one of those things where, you don't just think about it of like during a heat wave of like, oh man, I remember back in July when it only topped out at like 90. Yeah. Which, true. Like, growing up in New England,
90 was
hot.
Bananas hot.
I mean, even in Maryland, like 90, 92, that was a hot summer day. Yeah. Like, especially on the water, like. Yeah. So there's lots of things that heat affects, and it's not just the planet. It affects us too. Yes. In a lot of different ways. So hopefully we can come up with some solutions. Not we, the royal we.
Yeah. The people who study this stuff and know what to do.
I take my reusable bag to Trader Joe's. Okay, guys?
I do that.
I think we need bigger mitigation strategies.
It's not me. I'm doing the best I can.
I'm doing the best I can.
All right, let's leave it there before it gets too depressing. All right, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review or a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Did you know that you can leave comments on Spotify now?
I did learn that.
So leave some comments.
Leave comments.
All right, that's a wrap. So remember, whether you are lifting weights or lifting each other up, let's keep breaking barriers, building strength, and embracing our rainbow of resilience. Until next time, bitches and bears, stay fierce and stay fabulous.